Hi, today we're joined by David Lefkovits, the founder of WellPro, a platform that's using AI to streamline the entire clinical workflow, from before a patient visit to after it's done. We talk about how WellPro is helping doctors work faster and smarter, the challenges of bringing AI into healthcare, and what it takes to innovate in such a complex industry. All right, we're rolling. So, David, welcome to our podcast. Very happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So, I was checking your career. You've built, managed, and advised through finance, e-commerce, consulting, and now healthcare. Not only that, but also with a worldwide or global view in most of these. Is there anything that ties all of that together? Your journey?
Well, I guess some people like a big steak and a big potato. I like eating tapas. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. Variety is enriching. It's fun. It's interesting. As to the global side, I'm originally South American. I came to the States for college. I've lived in Europe, worked extensively throughout Europe and Asia and Latin America. So I guess being a global citizen gives you that global perspective and that hunger for global exposure.
That's very interesting. One thing that I'm always very curious about, I have done a little bit of traveling and studying abroad as well. And one thing I can't really imagine is like startups or, building something that will span across like multiple peoples and cultures. I imagine that brings like challenges, just trying to understand different needs in different locations for different audiences in a sense. How do you handle that? What do you think about that?
Well, my global experience is not from a startup perspective. It's I did have a corporate background before I went into entrepreneurship, even though it was not for that long. But yeah, cultures are very different. People are different. So, I think it's important. And this is not my this is not where I excelled necessarily when I was young and a little bit more, and arrogant, if that's a good term. But it's important to come into new cultures, listening, learning, understanding before, implementing or executing. And that's probably to be said with anything, even within your own culture, right? But really learning that there are many ways and many styles, and understanding what's the most effective path is key.
And looking at your journey, we see that AI is kind of like the last leg of that up until now. AI in healthcare, of course, with WellPro, but also AI with before that. How exactly was that? Like, you jumped to AI. Definitely, it is the future. I think all of us can agree. How did that happen? When did you notice it? If that's a good question, I guess.
Well, I think I noticed it at the same time most of the world noticed it. The timing happened to work out for me. But, when ChatGPT came out December of 2023, it was pretty remarkable, right? It felt like magic. It was just, even though that had been going on for a while, the world hadn't really taken notice. Maybe the scientists knew what was coming, but for most of us, it was a pretty remarkable milestone. And so coincidentally, a few months after that, I exited my last company, which is completely unrelated, on-demand manufacturing, and we had an e-commerce component, and I was already enamored with AI. My background is fairly technical. I'm an industrial engineer, so workflow processes is my thing. But every business I've done, the common denominator has been a focus on technology as a differentiator. So, I was an early adopter of ChatGPT, and after my exit, a few months after that, I dedicated 7, 8 months to really studying the intricacies of the transformative side of AI. AI has been around since the 50s, right? An if-then statement is AI, right? A calculator is AI. But in the recent past, there's been some key transformations, large language models, advancements in natural language processing, a few other emerging technologies that have really put AI on the map. And so that's where I spent my time really trying to understand the intricacies. It was more of a rabbit hole because things were changing on a daily basis, right? And so it was an intense 6, 7 months of just reading, studying. I probably worked harder at that than I did in my previous um, endeavors, but and that gave me a baseline to start looking at a few different use cases. One of which was healthcare.
Definitely, yeah. And getting into WellPro, one thing I noticed in these past podcasts I've done is that there's no better way like to actually understand what a startup or an idea is than just like straight up asking its founder. So I'll ask you, what is WellPro and what are you guys trying to achieve?
Well, that's a loaded question. I mean, if I have to give you a high level answer, it's an AI native clinical platform that augments clinicians. And so, to get into a little bit more detail, I can talk to you about how this originated and where our niche or beachhead or wedge into this space is. Healthcare is not an easy industry. In fact, it's completely the opposite. And so, but essentially, the value of AI, the transformative side of AI is essentially to go from A to Z in a much more effective, streamlined way. It's acceleration, is augmentation. In many cases, it's automation. And so, uh, when you have sectors like healthcare, like law, like many others, supply chain manufacturing, where there's lots and lots of data, it's very hard for any human to be able to internalize and process all that data. And so, uh, this is one area of significant opportunity: is how can we streamline workflows and processes to go through these steps quicker, more effectively, safely. Um, and so that's the baseline, the basis of how I started looking at the potential opportunities. And I started looking at the legal side and the healthcare side, which, if you think about it, initially, a lot of the initiatives out there around AI were on the lower cost side. For example, copy, design, and again, when I say lower cost, I'm talking, $10 an hour, $20 an hour, 40, $50 an hour. When you start getting into attorneys and health professionals, now we start getting into significantly higher cost per hour, and there's more at stake too. So that's kind of the area where I gravitated towards. And my wife happens to be a doctor; she's in internal medicine, and so that's an area I've been around for many years. We've been married for almost 20 years, and so I'm familiar with that as a spouse. And so, in a lot of the heartaches and challenges that clinicians face.
That's true. Some of these that you've mentioned are pretty high trust areas, right? Like such law and health. I think health, perhaps one of the most high trust of all, right? We're literally dealing with human lives, and a lot of trust goes into that, right? Uh, I tend to see, David, from whenever I see people kind of bringing together AI and medicine, there seems to be like this kind of two cliche views of it. Some people, and I'm on that side, think that, yeah, that's going to change the future and that's going to be absurdly awesome. I'm very glad, like, to imagine that the clinics I go to, the doctors I go to, that they are being augmented by AI. Not just that, but research, I hope, is already in a good level. But you also get, the kind of views like people that get worried, like, oh my God, is my doctor using ChatGPT, for instance? And is that even a bad thing? What Again, going back to the trust, right? To the trust in this area. Where do you think? What do you think about that? Like, what's your vision on the trust AI and medicine combination factor? I'm not sure if you have the same experience as I have, where people are either very kind of scared of it, and other people are very, very, very hoping for more of it. Let's say.
Yeah. Well, a couple of facts. One is, already for years, patients go on Google to look at the
True.
things. And Google is significantly less reliable in many ways, right? To the point where being a physician today or a practitioner is not what it used to be. Years ago, there was significant respect. Now patients come to their doctors and say, "You're wrong," actually, and ask very specific, poignant questions on data that may or may not be solid. Now, yes, from a trust and confidence level, I mean, AI or large language models are not always 100% accurate. There's known issues around hallucinations and other factors. There's also lots of techniques to maximize the confidence levels, or to at least gauge what the confidence level is in the output. So there's techniques like grounding and many other ways to accomplish that. So it's not a plug and chug type thing where you just put data into ChatGPT and get a response. In fact, many of the models that we're using are not OpenAI. They're more specialized clinical models, and some are not specialized or large language models like Gemini. We're a Google shop, so we use the Google Cloud, and Vertex AI, which is their AI building platform. But there's a lot that goes to it to ensure that the clinical outputs are verified or sourced or rated in order to at least provide insights to the clinician as to how reliable that data may or may not be. So there's a lot that goes into it, um, but also I think it's important to separate AI into several categories. I mean, we've all heard of generative AI versus, so it, AI could be used very effectively for summarization, for data aggregation and contextualization. It can also be used for clinical decision support. I think what you're referring to is probably a little bit more on the decision support side. Can we trust the recommendations made by the model, right? As opposed to, can we trust how it summarized a document, or how it brought together a bunch of different fragmented data points into one view? And so there's different aspects to it.
I would like to ask you a little bit more to try and understand. So, what is WellPro's objective when we imagine, for instance, a clinician in their daily routines? Like, let's say I'm a user, I am a professional, I have full access to WellPro. What's my day like? Like, where will I use it the most?
Yeah. So let's get into that a little bit, because there's a lot of different tools that are being applied in healthcare, and I just want to maybe differentiate where we're at versus what a lot of the other folks are doing. And this is where you get into the whole conversation around point solutions um, versus broader workflow solutions. Obviously, as a startup, it's much more straightforward to start with a point solution that addresses one feature, one capability. It's easier to develop and deploy. It's easier to test in the market. It's significantly more challenging if you're doing a full workflow, an A to Z type coverage, because there's a lot more surface area to cover. And in clinical applications, the challenge is they're already working with multiple systems. That's one of the big problems. And you don't want to have to leave the system you're in, or leave your workflow to go somewhere else to take an action to then come back. I mean, that's additional waste of time. And so the biggest challenge in healthcare is the full workflow, is your day to day. And I'll just describe this fact, my vantage point. Um, my wife, for instance, and there's a big consideration around payers and insurance here in the U.S., but which does not adhere to the typical supply demand type ecosystem, right? Since in the U.S., for the most part, um, clinical providers is the only or physicians or nurse practitioners, mid levels, is the only professional career where you don't get paid more if you have more experience.
It's interesting.
So think about that. If you're a lawyer, if you're an engineer, if you're an architect, your hourly rate goes up as your experience and seasonality goes up. And as a practice or a firm, you can charge as much as you want as long as the market's willing to pay for it, right? You provide a better service, more value, you get paid more. In the healthcare space here, especially those constrained by insurance, you're paid based on what the insurance company is willing to pay you, regardless of your experience. And so that does not conform to the traditional supply demand. But my point was, uh, clinicians are going in to seeing 20, 15, 25 patients in a day. They're usually limited to no more than 15, 20 minutes per visit. And there may be a lot to cover. It's very hard to go through all that. Additionally, there's a lot of data. There's no time to really internalize all that data. So you see a patient, you may remember that patient, but if it's a first-time patient, you want to go through all their past medical records. You want to go through all their labs. All these are PDF attachments. That's a lot of different data points to try to analyze and evaluate and come to conclusions very quickly, especially if you don't even have time to prepare, right? And so beyond that, because of insurance and other regulatory frameworks, you need to document everything very clearly, not only from a legal standpoint, but also in order to get reimbursed by insurance. Your coding needs to be in place. I mean, there's a lot of things that need to happen to make sure that you actually get paid for the services you rendered, even though you're getting paid at a limited level. So that's a lot of administrative burden. That's a lot of cognitive burden for the physicians also to keep track. I mean, imagine having a panel of 4,000, 5,000 patients in a year and seeing 18 to 25 patients a day, right? So, and on top of that, you need to document everything. And then you're done with a day, but now you've got an inbox full of new labs that came in, messages from patients, messages from your nurse, prescription refill requests. I mean, and the list goes on and on and on. Clinical notes that you haven't finalized that you have to go back to and finalize. There's a lot. It's a whirlwind, right? And so you can see already how that can impact efficiency significantly. It detracts from care, and there's a lot of other consequences downstream from that. So the question is, where do you focus on? And a lot of the solutions that have been being built, most of them are focused on the billing side, because that's where the biggest dollar opportunity is. That's where the healthcare systems are, and they want to maximize revenue generation. Of course, it's a business. That's just a reality here in the US. And so the administrator's responsibility is to maximize revenue and profit, even if we feel that shouldn't be the case, right? That's a reality. And there's lots of systemic barriers too around pharma and insurance, even the food industry, that contribute to poor health, and it's part of the whole ecosystem, right? So essentially, a lot of the work ends up being, how do we make sure we're submitting the right coding? How do we make sure we maximize billing? And so that's the whole revenue cycle management side. That's not where we're focused on. Additionally, there's some other point solutions that are maybe easier to adopt. And the most common one now that we see in healthcare is AI scribes. So essentially, when there's a patient encounter, a visit, to have an AI listening to the conversation, transcribing it, and then generating clinical notes from it, organized in a certain way. And today we have, I don't know, 800 plus of those scribes around. And in my opinion, that's a race to the bottom. It's commodity. Intelligence is becoming commoditized very quickly. And so what's the differentiator, right? And so all these are starting to look at how do we extend our footprint. So long response to your question, but essentially what we're tackling is a full clinical workflow. Everything from before you see a patient, during the encounter, post encounter. Most of what we're focusing on now is augmentation, and what I mean by that is helping the clinician, not doing the work necessarily for them. The clinician still needs to review and make sure things are accurate. They still need to sign off, but it's creating shortcuts to streamline their workflow and making things easier for them. So imagine if you didn't have to go search for data, you could just ask a question and it would present the data right there. If it would give you a summary, so you don't have to read through tons of documents and records and different screens and go to different menu options. So that's the streamlining that I was talking about. And then there's automation, which is another piece that we will tackle later, which is task automation. If you get a prescription refill request, 80% or more of those can be automated. Some need, or at least even if they're not automated completely, the clinician can be presented with the right information so they can make a quick decision rather than having to search for it themselves. So that's a clear differentiation, augmentation, and automation. But essentially, what WellPro is doing is tackling the full clinical workflow. And there's a lot of different pieces to that, augmented and automated with AI.
This is amazing. I had never like considered just the sheer amount of extra stuff that a medical professional has to deal with around like just trying to solve someone's medical issue, right? Just the paperwork, finding stuff, and that's true. I mean, how much time is being wasted trying to go for specific information that's in a PDF somewhere in an email or buried in a lab login? There's just so much effort, right? And releasing a professional from the burden of having to manually go and get everything is just kind of focusing on what matters, right? Just focusing on, you have a patient, you have a problem, or not even a problem, you have a patient, let's make things better. The professional now has time and energy to focus just on what matters. This is awesome. And I'm imagining, I don't know, David, how are professionals dealing with all of this right now? I imagine multiple tabs, different logins everywhere, paper trails.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's how did people deal with things when before there was cell phones and faxes and email? Things were a lot slower and a lot less efficient. The difference here is healthcare is a little bit of a different animal because it's not about being slower. You can't be slower. For the numbers, for the financials to work, you need to do a lot more with a lot less. It's almost like doing your job with your hands tied behind your back. And so that presents significant issues. And that's why it's known that clinician burnout is a big thing. There's a lot less people studying medicine. A significant amount of clinicians are leaving the space, retiring much earlier, and it's become a big problem. Not to say that the quality of care has decreased significantly too over time. And so, back in the days before electronic medical records or electronic health records, these are new systems put in place at the end of the 90s, early 2000s. A lot of this was driven by regulatory and compliance around insurance and incentives the government had for both companies to build these systems and for clinicians to adopt them. But prior to this, it was the old-fashioned way. You made your notes, you documented the patient's story. You understood the context of your patient. You had the time to really think through and work through all this stuff. Today, a lot of that information has to be translated into data fields. So a lot of the context is lost. And so being able to leverage all that context adds significant value, understanding the patient's story. So that's a part of it, but easier said than done. So the question is, yes, anybody can say, well, listen, there's a huge opportunity in healthcare. Let's jump in it. And healthcare is one of those industries that's very complicated. As I said, the systemic barriers are significant. Lots of bureaucracy. It's monopolistic. I mean, there's a few big players and they control everything. Even on the electronic health records, the systems that hospitals and clinics use to, there's tons of them, but there's a few really big ones that control most of the ecosystem. And so coming in and working with these folks is not a done deal. It's hard to penetrate. So when I first started looking at these use cases, it was evident to me that the traditional healthcare system was going to be a real hard nut to crack. And it was going to be years before being able to gain much traction. And also, this is where everybody was trying to focus on. And I wanted to focus on the clinician side. How do we make their life better, and how do we generate and provide better outcomes for their patients? Not necessarily on the economics side of. Additionally, I wanted to build something generational over the next 10, 15 years, something that would not tackle the needs today, but that would be the operating system, the infrastructure needed to power healthcare of the future. And I think when you look at where healthcare is going, today it's reactive. It's symptoms based. You're sick, you go to the doctor, you get medication to address that symptom, not to identify the root cause, right? And so it's a lot more of chronic disease management than it is chronic disease prevention. It's a lot more handling acute issues, right? So, um, where we see healthcare going is more a preventative, proactive model, a personalized model. So you know very well that what works for you may not work for somebody else. We all know this because some people eat 5 brownies and they're still slim, right? Others drink water and they gain 10 pounds. So our
Yeah.
bodies react very different to nutrition, to the environment, to medication. Our genetic compositions are different. That has evolved significantly too, where we're transcending genetics, and we've learned that it's not about the genes that you have necessarily, but about the gene expression and how these genes are turned on and off. That's epigenetics. My point being is there's lots and lots of new advanced sciences, diagnostics, a lot more data, and that's only going to increase exponentially. I mean, we're just starting to learn about the biome, the gut, and how that impacts the rest of our body and how they're connected to your brain. And we're just in the infancy levels there. And so um, there's only going to be a lot more data. So one of the biggest bottlenecks to personalized proactive care is how do we leverage all this data that is available and how do we make sense of it? How do we turn complexity into clarity for clinicians? And so I got exposed to this area, this niche, call it personalized medicine. And so I don't know, integrative functional medicine, longevity medicine, you've probably heard those terms as they're becoming more and more popular. They're all root cause based, focus on increasing longevity, health span, which is a quality of the life. So it's not only extending life, but also augmenting the quality of that life. So, long story short, these guys are the trailblazers of the future of healthcare. They're looking at significantly more data points. They're trying to be proactive, preventative, but it's a tall order because there's a lot to contend with.
What's the biggest challenge? I mean, you've built in different areas. Then you've mentioned some of the challenges for the medical area, but what are some of like the technical challenges that you see now? What's the next, let's say, the next problem that has to be solved to improve how AI and health work alongside?
Well, I see it a little bit less from that perspective because there's still a lot to be tackled with the current status of technology. I don't see it as much as a tech challenge because tech's evolving. It's getting better, and it's getting better by the day, by the week. The the biggest challenge is really, I think, developing the right workflows and understanding the clinician needs. And so that's what we're focusing most of our attention. We're not reinventing AI. I mean, there's plenty of billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar companies that are building the infrastructure, the processing capabilities, the large language models, the infrastructure layer, if you will, the and even the tooling. We're in the applied AI side, vertical applied AI. So how do we take this technology and make it available, safe, and accessible to the users? And that in itself is a significant science. Um, and so that's really the biggest challenge we're trying to address. Additionally, you have to do this all in the context of where your users are today, right? I mean, the technology is there that if we could potentially do something super futuristic where it's a black box and you just talk to the data, but you can't see it, you can't navigate. That may be a little bit too much of a stretch from most people's muscle memory. And so you need to build a workflow that's still within that normalized range. Maybe you're pushing the limit of the normalized range, but it still needs to configure to the way we think of workflows. And also be very aware that as time progresses, that needs to evolve. And the range of normal keeps being pushed. And so you always want to be pushing the envelope on the range of what's normal. So whereas it would be really nice to say, let's build a an Alexa with a screen. That probably would be challenging to get people to adopt that. They want to see the data. They want to make sure the AI is working properly. They want to be able to use reference points to contextualize. But with time, as things become more normalized and technology advances and the UI and the UX evolves, we're going to get more used to it, and these things will become more normalized. So it's a whole process, it's a whole evolution beyond technologies, just on the workflow side.
That reminded me of a couple of things that as UX professionals here, we always have also to balance, like how much of novelty do we want to bring into a system and how much of like consistency, memorization, do we want, where's the balance into making a system feel new and bringing new ideas into it, slash making sure users are still feeling like, hey, I know how to use this. It's, a product that it's very similar to what I have been using with improvements. And David, I'm not sure about the exact data, but I had the information from somewhere that if AI technology stops progressing, like right now, let's say we don't advance a single percent, no improvements as of right now, we'd have like what, 5 years to a decade of just adapting existing markets to the current level of AI. What do you think that tells like to the future? If right now we are kind of like riding or surfing behind the wave, if this speeds up, how do you see? What do you see for the future in that? If we continue advancing and we're not even at a point where all of us are using what's currently here, are we always? Do you think we're always going to be kind of chasing? What's the last technology AI has to offer in a sense?
Yeah, first of all, we are way behind, right, in everything, and there's that just to me represents significant opportunity. We have tons of there's a significant pipeline of work that needs to be done to catch us up to where technology is, and that's only getting faster and faster. I mean, the world is moving very, very quickly, right? And so, but if you think about it, let me go back to healthcare. It's no different than um, traditional medicine catching up to all the emerging studies. So when you go to medical school and you're at the medical curriculum, for many years they said that um, practicing physicians were about 17 years behind the latest evidence-based studies. Now, that's still a number that's being used. I don't know how accurate it is anymore. It's probably gone down significantly, but still, let's call it multi-year behind.
Mm-hmm.
Every day, there's hundreds or thousands of new evidence-based studies that are published. How can you keep up with that as a physician, number one? Number two is, how do you incorporate that into the medical curriculum? In fact, if you think about it, traditional medicine today, if you're primary care, there's not much of nutrition and lifestyle in the curriculum, even though that we
Wow.
know that's a big part of uh, preventative health, right? But that's
Mm-hmm.
not what the curriculum is based on right now. And to churn that wheel just takes a lot of time. So we're already lagging in many other ways, but and again, beyond AI, let's call it large language model, is an equalizer of sorts. So let me just give you an example. Standards of care. So if you've got a physician that's been out of medical school for 15 years and is super experienced, um, and actually, let me reverse that example. If you have a very unique condition and you've gone to 7 or 8 specialists and nobody can figure out what it is, ultimately you'll hit a specialist that somewhere, somehow, because of the years in practice, they've seen that issue. Very rare, but they've seen it. So it's very dependent on the level of experience and the knowledge that practitioner has. Beyond that, in the healthcare world, things are very siloed. So when you go to medical school, if you study internal medicine, you're a generalist. There's so many specialities, and all these specialities have subspecialities, and these subspecialities have multiple subspecialities because there's so much to cover. Imagine having that knowledge base that you can reference directly. That's what an LLM is, and it's only getting better. Where now you have access to all that information. And so I think that's going to really change the way the world works, but also specifically healthcare. I mean, this applies to any sector beyond healthcare, but particularly healthcare. And as I said, I mean, we're always going to be behind, I think, from where technology is, and how do we catch up? And just building the tools to be able to catch up doesn't mean that they will be easily adopted. And even if users were willing to adopt it, there's compliance, there's regulatory frameworks, there's a lot of other hurdles that make this process slower. So, in conclusion, I think one is yes, that's a reality, but I think that presents a lot of opportunity, and there's plenty of work to be done. So if people are thinking, well, what is my career going to be like when AI comes and takes away all these jobs? Well, there's plenty of work to be done, and AI still needs to be led. It's just like ChatGPT. If you go in and have a really weak prompt,
Yeah.
you're going to get a lousy answer. If you have a very thoughtful, detailed exchange with the model, you're going to get significantly better, more output. So we still need people to lead the direction and lead the AI agent force, if you will. And there's still tons of work to be done to catch up with where technology is. So really, it's a shift of people's skills and expertise in that direction. I mean, if you look at our roadmap, it's endless. We could see this never ending in terms of there's not enough time to do all the things that we want to do.
It's fascinating. And based on your research and, of course, all the knowledge you're building in the healthcare industry while bringing the AI technology into it, I've heard of MI, and I have I really hope we achieve something. I'm not sure if you heard of the longevity escape velocity, a theory in which AI will advance so quick that who's alive today are gonna expand their lifespans for so long that the next discoveries that will be made because of those that have been made now will start stacking, and basically, there's no end. Technically, it reaches a point where if technology speeds so much up, whoever's alive today could get to live to, I don't know, 500 years. Is that science fiction? Does that sound more to you like science fiction, or do you believe like that we can speed up so much, so fast that, something like a 500-year lifespan could be possible and realistic?
Listen, I'm not nearly qualified to answer that because I have no idea. I can say that weird things happen. I mean, COVID-19, that felt like science fiction.
Yeah.
Right? What's happening today feels like science fiction. We do know that things are happening a lot quicker. And so what used to take 10 years of evolution now in 3 months is happening. So is that a possibility? I guess, right? I think AI is also expediting research. And I don't think it's out of the question to think that most cancers will be addressed. Dementia and Alzheimer's, there may be ways to address that. We may find ways to biohack our bodies to extend our lifespan. To what extent, I don't know. But I do think that we are going to be able to live longer. If we follow suit, if we keep on eating the way we're eating and we keep being sedentary, I don't know that technology will maybe keep us alive longer, but not the quality of life will not be there. So maybe it'll take care of lifespan, but certainly not health span. So it's a balance. But to answer your question, I have no idea. Does it sound viable to me that in the next 10, 20 years, people are going to be able to live until 500? No, it does not sound viable to me. Is it possible? At this point, anything's possible.
Who knows? I'd be scared if you said, no, I definitely know that this is going to happen. I'd be really scared. But yeah, and, exploring technology and AI as a whole, you have been involved with AI in different markets, apart from, healthcare, which is a very important one. Do you see any low-hanging fruit? Like, I've personally, recently, I've tried doing personal finances, like using AI to understand better my spending and my patterns, and trying to optimize all of that. And I have to say, I've struggled finding good tools, for instance. I've personally felt like with a little bit of research, one could realize that there's like a lot of open space for good AI assisted tools for like personal finances, for instance. I don't know. In your opinion, have you seen any other industries that are at the moment lacking and could be definitely be leveraging AI better?
Every industry, everything. I mean, I don't think there's an exception. It's almost like asking, do you see any industry where using computing technology can help? I mean, today that's just ubiquitous. No matter what you do, you need to use a computer, right? No matter what you do, you need to be able to correspond via email or phone. Um, that was not the case 30, 40 years ago. And so, this is sort of a new order, right? And AI is going to be an underlying foundational thing for everything. And so we're, and this is where this is the most exciting for me, because throughout my professional career, everything I've worked with, all my entrepreneurial endeavors have been joining a mature existing industry where you had to differentiate based on business model or better service or better product. This is the first time I've been able to join an industry from the very nascent beginning. And we all have that opportunity right now. And so, it feels like we're being left behind if we didn't start already. But the truth is, I mean, if we look at 5 years from now, if you start today, you're still at the very early stages. It's almost like if somebody, and I don't necessarily endorse or believe in crypto. This is just an analogy, but it's almost like somebody saying, you want to buy Bitcoin in 2008. It's that opportunity, right? Now there's going to be ups and downs, but we all have the opportunity now to join at the very inception of a significant revolution. So, and again, there's a lot of people, a lot smarter, a lot more prepared with much greater insights than I, that formulate the fact that years from now, none of us are really going to be working much, right? There's going to be plenty of abundance. Almost everything is going to be free, and knowledge, services, product, everything. And so, you know, but as of right now, over the next few years, there's still significant opportunities. And by the way, this idea that AI is doing everything, that today you don't need a development team because you need one project manager that manages a team of 10 AI agents. That's happening, but we're not completely there yet. There's still a lot of legwork that needs to be done, especially in the environment that we're in. You can't just delegate this to independent AI agents to do all the work. Now, they are helping with coding, with testing, with um, a lot of different areas. But anyway, very long answer. The response is everywhere and anywhere in every sector, there's significant opportunity to transition from the current modus operandi to one that leverages these emerging technologies to do things faster, better, more effectively.
I have to agree with you, David. From what I have been seeing, and especially more recently, I don't think I've used recently a single AI tool in which it didn't need like human supervision and like human guidance to a very high level, in a sense that if whoever's behind the wheel is not an expert enough to get a specific task done, the task would not get done. What I'm seeing personally, or not personally but professionally with UX, is good designers can achieve good results faster with AI and with the tools we've been using, but I still haven't seen any technology that's allowing, let's say, an experienced designer or just a straight up bad designer to achieve good results. Maybe it helps them study for it, of course, but I still seem to see from a personal point of view that, yeah, AI is this tool, very, very powerful one, but if whoever's driving it is not in the expected level of an outcome that is desired, you're not going to get there. Like it's like this. For a designer to become and get a good task done with AI, he will first use AI to become a good designer and then get that result done. And I'm not sure in other markets, is that something you've seen as well?
Well, listen, I think this is no different than having a Formula One car. I mean, a Formula One car is super powerful, right? But how fast and your ability to win races has to do with what good a pilot you are, right? I mean, that's just an example. I mean, I think over time it may not translate in, it may transcend that, because even if you're not a good pilot, the AI will pilot in your behalf. And so, there's different degrees. And so who knows what's going to happen over the next 10, 20, 30 years. I think most of us cannot conceive what the world is going to look like, and it's beyond our imagination, right? I think some people that are very visionary may have a better understanding of what that's going to look like. But um, listen, I think I adhere to the old-fashioned way of looking at things. It takes work. You start today. You move as things move. You adapt, and you evolve. And you want to have some vision, but you also want to be pragmatic. And so, I know, that's at least how I go about it. Uh, I started uh, less than 2 years ago with very little understanding of the transformative side of AI and minimal understanding of a healthcare system. I started from ground zero, and just it builds over time. Nothing happens overnight.
David, you've mentioned UX previously, and of course, we are a UX design studio, so we're very, very interested in that. How do you see in WellPro how do you see UX and UI in your product? Like, what's your vision of it?
Well, we have significantly more experience and smarter people working on the UI UX side. I can tell you, for me, in the very beginning, it's more about understanding the user's workflow, and in understanding how do you streamline that workflow, and then how do you translate that into user experience. But what I think I'm at least very careful with is, I think a lot of startups and a lot of companies don't work out because you speculate in terms of what the market needs. Here, I think it's really a balance between one foot listening very closely to what users want and need. So one foot grounded in existing requirements, another foot grounded in being able to add additional perspective that the user may not be aware of. So you have to have a component of vision of where users are going to, anticipating user needs, but you can't solely anticipate user needs. You also have to maintain a strong balance in terms of what they need and what they want. So you need to pay close attention to what they want, but you also have to formulate your own point of view of where things are going. So that dance, that balance is a hard one and that's why you need people that are experienced, that have done this before, that are visionary. I mean, as you said, it takes really, really good people to be able to pull this off effectively.
Yeah, it's constant balance, right? Of what we know they want, and trying to predict what they will want, given new introductions of new ideas and systems and functions, and whatever a product might have, and a beautiful one at that. David, I have a couple extra questions I'd like to ask you.
Yeah,
I have this one that I ask founders and builders a lot, and I think I have to ask that one for you. I have to ask you, what's success like for you in WellPro? What would make you go, okay, this project is successful. Like I'm happy with where we are and what we are achieving. What's success like for you in WellPro? What's your vision? What's your objective?
So, I mean, that's a interesting question, because there's not an answer really. First of all, it's a moving target. If success to me looks like achieving a certain revenue milestone today, once you hit that, that's no longer or as you're getting closer to hit that, that's no longer a goal, and you've moved on, and transcended that, right? Then you have the more cliches responses, which are, I want to transform healthcare and I want to impact lives. It's very subjective because, again, it's a moving target. So, yes, all of that, right? Revenue, number of users, impacting the way clinicians deliver care, making their lives easier, improving outcomes for patients. I mean, all these are our goals and expectations. But I think what at least I've learned is you need all these goals and objectives. But the biggest sign of success, in my opinion, is that on a daily basis, you're still super excited about what you're doing, and you still wake up in the morning looking forward to the work that you're doing. It's still interesting, exciting. If it's not, I mean, that's, and also this is my fifth company. That's probably not would have not been my answer years ago, where the only thing I cared about was reaching a financial milestone,
Mhm.
and then you hit it, and then uh, and so you don't really enjoy the moment. But this is fun. It's super interesting. It's you know with this one I get to use a lot of. I mean, I made so many mistakes in the past. I get to leverage a lot of my learnings to try to make this venture more more successful. Uh, and Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I don't think there's an answer to it, really. There's just
You've met.
conversation.
Oh yeah, a moving. I think moving target is perhaps one of the coolest descriptions or answers to that question I've ever had. To be honest, it is just such a moving target, isn't it? And humans are all like that, I guess. If we reach a certain milestone, and if that's like a financial one, for instance, I wouldn't know what to do in the next morning. I'd sit down and go, okay, are we done? What's the next one? Therefore, yeah, a moving target. That's awesome. You've mentioned some mistakes and learning from the past, David. I'm almost 30 by now, and I am running out of fingers in my hands to count mistakes that I already know that I would like to have changed and I would do differently by now. You have built multiple companies by now, pretty much a serial entrepreneur. What would you have, like, is there specific things that you've learned that you would do differently? Or even if I don't like the way this question is usually posed, but if you could, meet yourself from like a couple years back when you were just starting perhaps your first company, what would you tell yourself? Or what mistakes would you avoid or focus on something different?
Oh, listen, I mean, it's that's the same thing as asking if you could go back 20 years, how would your investment portfolio look like? How would you
Oh, yeah.
make the? I mean, having the answers, eh, I could spend days telling myself what to do. The challenge is I probably would have not listened at that
Oh,
point.
yeah.
You have to go through things before you know, and and listen, this is another cliche type answer, but the truth is, if you're not making mistakes, you're not pushing the envelope hard enough. Now, there are things that I think, in retrospect, I should have done differently, not to avoid mistakes, but to have thought through decisions more carefully. But as they say, our strengths are also our weaknesses. Traditionally, I've been more impulsive, aggressive, and so my brother and I built a couple companies together. He is very methodical, not as quick, but significantly more diligent. And so when we were working together, if it weren't for me, things would have happened a lot slower. If it
Mm.
weren't for him, we would have lost our shirt a long time ago, right? So, I the reason I move on things and is because of my personality is impulsive, but I've learned to try to think through decisions more carefully, spend more time thinking through them. My first gut is not necessarily the right one. Sleeping on things, I mean, just stuff that as you get older, you moderate a little. Even though my inclination is always to jump on it right away and move immediately, right? You just have to work through controlling yourself. But yeah, I mean, learning is inevitable, right? If you're, I mean, there is a point where in order to be successful, you can't make too many mistakes, or you have to make less mistakes and you make good choices, right? And that's why not every initiative works. But there are people that are really good decision makers. I mean, again, not to cliche this, but Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. I mean, they've made plenty of mistakes, but their strength has always been their decision making, and slow and steady wins the race, right? But that's their personality. That's not my personality. I don't think I would have the patience to do a lot of what they did.
That's a strong combination then with your brother. The question is, you've started learning to, maybe think twice, sleep on it. I guess one more question would be, has your brother started being more like you in a sense of, taking action faster? Did you influence each other on that journey, or?
I don't know that we influence each other. I think we challenge each other, and we sort of stopped each other or accelerate each other. But we haven't worked together for a few years. I mean, we still talk a lot and talk through each of our challenges. But no, I don't think I've. Listen, I mean, it's like eating, right? My appetite hasn't changed. I just have had to start eating less to lose weight, especially now that I'm in this environment, right? I don't know if that's a good analogy or not, but listen, life is tough. Peaks and valleys.
Awesome. So, David, you have this mentality of taking decisions as quick. Yeah, that's a horrible way to start that one. Decision making. How do you see decision making? What's the balance between immediate decisions or pondering them for a little?
Yeah. So I think we were just talking how in the past I've always been very impulsive in decision making, and I've found that it's helpful to delay decision making as much as makes sense, right? Some decisions need to be made right away. They're less consequential, and therefore they can be made quicker. Some decisions are significantly more consequential, and so why make that decision sooner than you have to? And I've found that the more time you have to ponder and digest and question, the better the decision becomes. To what extent do you want to accumulate lots of decisions? But it's a balance, right? And so that's one area that I've honed in on, is how do I delay my decision making to when it needs to be done, and not any time necessarily sooner. Just waiting a night and thinking through it again the next day, I always have a new perspective. It's the same thing with emails. When you draft an email in the heat of the moment, and you just want to hit send, right, to feel that satisfaction, sometimes you wait and say, I'm going to relook at it tomorrow. Usually you're going to have edits that are going to make it more effective. I mean, I've found that to be the case. Now, if it needs to be responded today by 5, that's not an option. If it's super consequential, then why would it require it being responded right away? But if that's the case, sometimes you have to do what you need to do.
Perfect. David, once again, I'd like to thank you a lot for coming and having this conversation with me. It's been a blast. I love the honesty, and I love the fact that we've thrown in some cliche questions, talked about possible cliche answers, but we've found some knowledge even on them. Hey, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you. This was fun. Enjoyed.
Hope you have a good day. See ya.
You too.